Hi, I'm Claire and this is the Book to the Future tag. This tag was created by Lydia over at Something Like Lydia to celebrate Back to the Future Day on the 21st of October 2015, and she tagged me in the original tag, which is super exciting. Question 1 is pick 3 books that you love, one set in the past, one set in the present, and one set in the future. And for my book that is set in the past, I will go with the Glamorous History series by Mary Robinette Kowal. Now this is the first book, Shades of Milk and Honey, and it's quite a good read, but my favorite of the series is Of Noble Family, which is the 5th and final book in the series. And whilst Shades of Milk and Honey is pretty much just Jane Austen pastiche with magic, the series kind of evolves and grows, and Of Noble Family is Regency with magic, grimdark, and I really love that book. For my book that is set in the present, I've got I Am Princess X by Cherie Priest. I picked this up fairly recently because I love Cherie Priest's speculative fiction. This is her first YA novel, and it's kind of like a thriller mystery type of book, and it's really tense and really good. So if you'd like to know more about this one, I've got a full review of it right here, and you can go and check that video. For my book that is set in the future, I'm going to say The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Now, I love many books that are set in the future, but this one has to be one of my favorite books of all time. The setting for The Dispossessed is quite unusual. It's set on a planet and its moon, and basically a few hundred years before the start of the novel, there was a big revolutionary movement on the planet, and the way that the governments of that planet found to quiet the dissent and to stop all that revolution was to barter with the leaders of that movement and to say to them, look, you can have the moon. You can go on the moon, you can colonize it, you can run it however you want, but just stop bothering us here. The main character of the novel is a scientist named Fake, who was born and raised on the moon under its kind of communal / communist anarchist type of government. He's an absolutely brilliant physicist, but he's hindered in his work by the way that the government is, so he accepts an invitation to go down on the planet, which has a very capitalist, futuristic kind of setup. It's a fantastic piece of science fiction. It's a great thought experiment, there's a great premise, the writing. Question 2 is who is your Marty McFly, and for this one you have to pick the 21st book on your shelf, and that is Northern Lights by Philip Pullman for me, and then you turn to page 88, pick the first main character that you see on the page, transport them 30 years into the future, and talk about how they will fare and how they will react. So I've opened the book to page 88, and the first principal character that I ran into was Mrs. Coulter. And what would Mrs. Coulter do 30 years into the future? I'm assuming we're talking 30 years into the future of Northern Lights and not 30 years into the future of us right now, because it's quite a different world. I guess it would depend whether her plan for the end of this novel would succeed or not, because I think if she did manage to do the thing that she tries to do at the end, that would really make a very big difference to what the future would be 30 years from now. But whatever the future turns out to be in Northern Lights, I think that Mrs. Coulter would always land on her feet. I think that she would always manage to find a cunning way out of everything. She would charm everybody into letting her go anywhere that she wanted, or she would convince them, or she would threaten them. She's just not someone who's going to let like events and the way that the world is shaped or is changed around her change the fact that she's gonna get what she wants. She is someone who basically can make people do things. She's not a very pleasant lady. Question 3 is pick a classic and set it in the present or the future. what would happen? Would things still be the same? And for this one, I've picked The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. If you're not familiar with The Day of the Triffids, it's about what happens when the entire world goes blind. And it's about the Triffids, which are terrifying carnivorous plants that can walk and communicate and will hurt you, and all they needed to take over the world was for humans to be a bit less good at pruning them, and that is what happens when everybody goes blind. So this was first published in the 50s, and that's roughly when it's set, but I think it would be really interesting if it were set in the future, or even just now, because one of the things that they don't have in The Day of the Triffids is the instant communication that we have now, Twitter and texting and mobile phones. But at the same time, it would of course be very difficult for these characters to be cut off from this technology suddenly. You kind of just really want them to Wikipedia things if they don't know how to, you know, raise crops or whatever, but they can't because that is gone, and they have to learn to do everything in the old-fashioned analog way again. So I think that it would just add an extra dimension to this, because they would probably have a fairly similar plot to what it currently is, because the technology would fall apart and they would find themselves having to resort to the kind of things that they do in the book. But at the same time, you just have this this past knowledge of it and this extra level of, well, we've lost even more of the world. Question 4 is pick a book that is set in the present or the future and set it in the past. What would happen? Would things still be the same? And for this one, I have chosen Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, because I think having Fangirl set in the past would be really interesting. Maybe in the 70s or in the 80s, just because so much of this book is based online and in fanish communities, in a type of fandom that really dates back mostly to Harry Potter, right? Because there was fandom before Harry Potter. There were fanzines and mailing lists and conventions, and there are a lot of things that Kath could do to express her fanishness back in the day, in the 70s and in the 80s, but they would be quite different because they wouldn't be, you know, this kind of mass fanfiction.net era type. I would love to see it set a little bit in the past with the same characters. Question 5 is lightning never strikes twice. What is your favorite sequel to a book? I have a lot of sequels that I like, but my current favorite would have to be Ancillary Sword, which is the second book in the Imperial Ratch trilogy. Of course, Ancillary Justice won all of the awards last year, but I thought that Ancillary Sword was also really good, and I was able to kind of get into the story and get stuck in a little bit faster, because Ancillary Justice has a kind of double narrative going on where you follow two different timelines, whereas Ancillary Sword is all set in the same timeline, and it is all like very tense politicking type of things that I really personally enjoy. Question 6 is, if you're going to build a time machine, why not do it in style? If you could travel to the future in any form of literary transport, what would it be? It might not be the most original of answers, but if I'm going to travel in the future, I'm gonna want to take this guy, because, you know, if you're gonna travel in time, why not pick the best? And it counts as literary because there are plenty of tie-in novels. So this was the Book to the Future tag. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun coming up with answers to these questions, definitely. Let me know in the comments below what kind of time machine you would pick if you had to travel into the future. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check some of my other tag videos in the sidebar right here. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button for more videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.